From the plains to the rolling hills, Oklahoma is a state that resonates with stories of resilience, determination, and pride. Welcome to Inside the 1581, a podcast of the Oklahoma Hospital Association. Together, we'll dive deep into the heartbeat of the great state of Oklahoma as we journey through the rich history, diverse culture, and the ever-evolving landscape within the 1,581 miles of border in our nation's 20th largest state. Each episode of Inside the 1581 will feature conversations with the many voices which help shape our state's future and our shared vision of improving health and healthcare in Oklahoma.
Well, welcome to this edition of Inside the 1581. I'm Rich Rasmussen, President and CEO of the Oklahoma Hospital Association, and I am so excited to have with our guest today Dr. Jim Barrett, who is the team physician for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I just want, Jim, before we get into this, I just wanted to read a quote here. This is from the dean of the medical school at OU. And when you were awarded the 2020 NBA Physician of the Year, awarded to you by the NBA. And this is what he said. He said, Dr. Barrett is a brilliant and dedicated family medicine physician with an extensive background in sports medicine, so it is no surprise that he was honored as the NBA Physician of the Year. He is especially deserving of such recognition because he combines excellent care with a focus on the safety of each and every Thunder player every time they suit up and go onto the court. That's a pretty amazing testament.
Well, thank you. It's a little, I think that's a little over the top, but thank you for the nice words you said and for his nice words.
Well, and again, we're excited to have you here today. And, you know, what we kind of wanted to spend some time talking about is your role as a team physician. And certainly you've had impact on the players. You've had impact in your role as an emissary for OU. And so I thought we would just kind of talk about a little bit about, what does it take? What does it take to become a team physician for an NBA team? And I know you've had experience outside of the NBA. You've worked with Olympic athletes and other. Jim, tell us a little bit about what that's like.
So just a little background. To be a team physician at really pretty much any level, you need to have some background training, and that has progressed over the last, I'd say, 30 years to where most people who do that have done a sports medicine fellowship in order to get the extra training that they need to feel comfortable with taking care of athletes of all different levels. My particular journey, I'm going to start from the beginning.
Go for it.
So I grew up in a small town. I had 37 people in my graduating class. So you had to play all sports, or else we didn't have a sports team.
It's a small town in Oklahoma.
It's a small town in Kansas, but I grew up
on the border.
Okay. I grew up in Oklahoma on a farm, but we went to school in Kansas, but lived in Oklahoma most of the time. So that was my background in sports and my interest in sports. I wasn't good at sports, but I participated in a lot of different sports. Fast forward a little bit, I came to Oklahoma after having completed a family medicine residency and then a fellowship in sports medicine. And I did those in different areas of the country so that I could get exposure and to see how things are done in different areas. I got to work with the Sacramento Kings during my fellowship, which was a fun experience and gave me a lot of interest in potentially working with professional sports. I came to Oklahoma, was recruited by, at that time, Dr. Bill Grana, who was a big sports orthopedic surgeon in Oklahoma City, and his group, and it seemed like a natural fit for me to work with them as well as also teach at the same time. At that time, I took care of high school teams and small college, and there are some minor league teams in town that we took care of. There's a basketball team and a baseball team that we took care of, and that was part of my responsibility. As I was encouraged by Dr. Grant as well as others to look at working with the Olympics, and so I progressed with working with both the Paralympics, which is disabled athletes that compete at a really high level, as well as the regular Olympics. Got a lot of great experiences with them under my belt, as well as continuing to do work with high school teams, which again, for me is kind of foundational. It's like working with high school and small college and younger athletes is really the bread and butter, and it's where you see the most fun things happening, and you can make the most impact. I had the opportunity to work with Paralympics in Beijing and Rio in Olympic type of settings. And one of my fears of working with that group of athletes was that they're disabled, they're going to need things that I can't provide and that I'm not aware of. But what I found was that those group of athletes did not complain at all. They were just the opposite of complainers, and I hardly had to do anything related to their disability. Most of it was just the routine kind of nicks and bruises that you get as an athlete. We and continuing once the Hornets came to town after Katrina happened, we had the opportunity to start working with the NBA. And I was one of the backup physicians for that team. And then when the Thunder came into town, again, I was one of the backup physicians for the Thunder for a number of years until they had team physician that was a family doctor retired, and I was asked to take his place. So that was about 5 years ago when I started really working intensively with the professional athletes. It was, again, I was a little bit nervous about taking that position. I'd had a lot of experience with athletes, but again, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, and it is a different level of expectations for how you provide care to them.
Well, did you ever think that growing up in a small town, we talked earlier, a town of about 1,000 people, that you would be a physician and you'd be a team physician for an NBA team?
No, you
have to kind of sit back and pinch yourself.
No,
don't you?
I pinch myself every day, and it is I'm lucky to be in the position that I am, and it's a series of luck that has gotten me to the place that I am. So I'm thankful for that position, and every day I think about that.
And so you're running a family practice program for OU. Mm-hmm. And so what do you have students coming to you, med students coming to you and say, Jim, how can I fill your shoes? What do I need to do to become a team physician? Why don't you tell us a little bit about, how you're counseling young physicians, and certainly what you guys have done to build your sports medicine program there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the basics are you have to be good in your basic area. So for me, it's family medicine. For some, it's orthopedics. Depends on what your basic area is, but you really need to set that foundation up first. And then you want to develop the additional skills. And you want to take opportunities that come to you to provide sporting coverage for a variety of different sports so that you get comfortable. One of my first sports that I covered in the Olympic realm was field hockey. I had no experience with field hockey. So I spent a lot of time just learning about what is field hockey and how do they play the game and what are the injuries that they get. So having that curiosity, I think, is very important. And then I think it's also important to realize that different phases of your life are better for doing certain jobs. And so this is what I would tell my younger self, is that I don't have to be the head team physician for the NBA when I'm 35, because my kids are going to be growing up at that time, and I want to have some time to spend time with them as well as just time for myself. Now that I'm a little bit older, my kids are all grown, I've got that time that I can spend and not feel guilty about taking care of a team on a very regular basis and after hours a lot of the time. So
do you ever go home and step in front of your garage and you see that hoop up there thinking, I could do it?
I tried to.
You try. Yeah, I do the same thing. I'd be like, what did I learn last night in the game? We defeated the Clippers. What do I do?
When we were in the bubble, there was a time where we could just go on the court ourselves and kind of play. And I realized that I am well past my ability to play basketball well. And so just being able to do a free throw is a challenge now.
Oh, I'm always the one who's afraid they would call my name to come out there and for one of those challenges in the middle of halftime. Yeah, you don't want me to do that.
No.
And so you embarrass yourself. You can't get over that embarrassment either.
Absolutely.
So as the team physician, you have a number of other folks that you work with, right? You've got the trainers, you've got other orthopedists, if you have injuries. Tell us a little bit about the team that you have that help to serve the athletes, and I would assume the coaches as well.
Yeah. So and as the team physician, you're taking care of the team, but you're also taking care of a whole host of individuals around the team too. So you are basically you have a practice that involves 100 to 200 people that are surrounding that team. It's super the most important group a lot of times with that is the coaching staff and the athletic training staff that you work with, because they're part of your eyes and ears for the team, and they also you're relying on their assessments a lot of times because you're not on the court or at the venue a lot of times when they are evaluating players. So super important team that way. You also have to have a really extensive network of specialists that you work with. And so you mentioned the orthopedic surgeons. That's foundational to sports medicine, but things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So psychology, psychiatry, neurology, infectious disease, something we found out.
Oh, we're
going to
talk about that in the next segment. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that.
So there is a whole group of individuals that use outside of that. And then I have somebody that backs me up regularly because I want to be able to take time off and have vacation time. And so Brian Coleman is my backup, who we back each other up for multiple things, but that's critical too, is having that additional group of people that help to back you up, because it's not just you, for sure.
So what is your run of show? So you come into the game prep. The athletes arrive early. At what point do you arrive at the arena, and at what point, or kind of give us a run of what your day or your evening goes like on game day, and then also do you travel, and does that change differently?
Yes. So game day, I arrive an hour and a half before the game, and that's my check-in. So I check in with both teams. So at least in the NBA, the team physician takes care of both teams and the refs, and so so I check in with them before the game to make sure there's nothing that they need, and then we have a meeting before the game with the paramedics, the security, athletic trainers for both teams, to go through what happens if something bad happens, and just to kind of run through how do we talk to each other, who is everybody on the team today, and make sure that we have kind of thought through the different scenarios that we need to think through that might happen during the game. After that, I get something to eat, and then I go up and watch the game, which is one of the most fun parts of it. We also look at halftime. We go down at halftime to check in with the players, and then after the game, we check in with the players also to make sure that there's no needs that they have after the game. Usually, we'll be there. So I'll be there an hour and a half before the game and about an hour after the game.
And so, what do you find? You've been doing this now for since 2014. So, what do you find that's the most rewarding of this work?
There's lots of different
best seats
type
in the
of
house,
rewards.
probably.
Well,
right?
that's
good Christmas cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say working with a group of people that are all kind of working toward the same goal, and that is to keep individuals healthy and to give them the best care that we can do. That's probably the most that's what you feel best about at the end of the day.
Well, thank you, Jim. We're gonna come back here in a minute. We're gonna hear from one of our corporate underwriters, Forefront Healthcare. When we come back to the 1581, we come back, we're going to talk about that day on March 11th in the middle of COVID and what went into the decision making to shut down the game that day. So we'll come right back here to the 1581.
Are you looking to elevate your facility's support services? Forefront Healthcare is a leading provider of food, environmental services, and facility management solutions to hospitals nationwide. Recently recognized in 2023 as a top 100 best places to work by Modern Healthcare magazine, our comprehensive boutique approach ensures measurable clinical outcomes tailored to your facility. Elevate your facility's patient, staff, and family experience today by visiting forefronthealthcare.com or call 800-684-6450.
All right, welcome back to Inside the 1581. I'm here with Dr. James Barrett, who we call Jim, and who's here to share with us some of his experiences as being the team physician for the Thunder. And Jim, we kind of teased out when we left the last segment about that very important day on March 11th, 2020, when really COVID, I think, became real for everybody. There was a decision made to halt the game when the Thunder were playing the Jazz. I believe one of the players or two of the players had contracted COVID-19 at the time, and you all had to make a decision on that. And certainly following that, the NBA made a decision. But I think that was probably the shot around the world at that point. So kind of share with us, what was going on in your mind. I mean, you're sitting here smiling. I know, so much went into a decision like that. And I've subsequently read what a lot of the owners have said and other players, and certainly it was the right decision to make to protect everybody. But that was a pretty pressure-filled environment to be in. Kind of walk us through it, the decision-making that took place, and for you as a team physician, the responsibility you were carrying at that time.
Absolutely. So I'm going to set this up just a little bit. I was on jury duty that week. And we had been having weekly meetings with the NBA about COVID. My thoughts were that it was going to hit one of the coasts first and would migrate in. And so our responsibility would probably be lower. The NBA had required that we start working with a infectious disease specialist. And so the week before I had started meeting with an infectious disease person to help me out. Linda Salinas was her name. And so that kind of set the groundwork. I was being selected for a jury on the 10th, the day before this happened. And they asked if there was any reason that somebody couldn't stay on a jury trial for 3 weeks. And my phone was blowing up with different things about COVID throughout that time while they were selecting the jury. And I raised my hand and said, I'm responsible for the Thunder as well as my department's response to COVID. And I really don't feel comfortable being out for that long. Thankfully, the judge agreed with me and let me off. So she let me off around 3:00 that night. And not more than 4 hours later, I was called by the opposing team that was in town, the Utah Jazz, by their trainer, and he had a player that he was concerned that was sick and wanted me to come check him. I had a nurse that was willing to work with me after hours, and so we went up to the hotel room where they were staying at 11 o'clock that night, or maybe 10 o'clock that night, and tested Rudy Gobert. But we couldn't test for COVID at that time. So we tested everything else that we could test to prove that he had something else other than COVID. His symptoms were really mild. He had a low-grade fever. He didn't feel like eating. It wasn't the most flagrant case of COVID, but thankfully the trainer had kind of flagged that it was not his normal. We got our testing results back that night. He didn't have the flu. He didn't have mono. He didn't have strep. We ran a viral series that next morning. It was all negative. One of his teammates came in that morning also that was sick and tested positive for COVID, but not, coronavirus, but not COVID. And that was just another little forewarning, I think, for what was to happen. I contacted the NBA to let them know that we had a player that we suspected might have COVID and that we needed to test them. At the time, I didn't realize there were only there were 100 tests in Oklahoma available.
In the whole state,
in the whole
available.
state.
And you had to procure
and we were
those,
going to potentially use one of those valuable tests up for a player from Utah, even. And so again, thankfully, the infectious disease consultant and the NBA both agreed with me that we needed to test him. And so we went about the process of trying to figure out how to get him tested. His team required a couple things of me. One is that I not tell anybody what was going on, so that they had the first right of refusal for any information. They also required that a private vehicle go pick him up at the hotel. Well, there's not any private vehicles in Oklahoma City that I know of that would pick somebody up that's sick and take him to the hospital. So I ended up going to his hotel room to pick him up.
Oh, you picked him up?
I picked him up in my car. He didn't want to come. He was mad and he was scared. And it took his trainer about an hour to coax him out of the hotel room down to my car. So by that time, it was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The game started at 7. So we need to have a decision made by 7 o'clock so that the game could either continue or not continue. My counterpart in the NBA gave me some really good words of advice, and that was, so for me, I would think, it's very unlikely he has this. So I'm not thinking I need to prepare anything further other than that he's going to be negative. But he said, Jim, you got to prepare that as if he's going to be positive, and so make sure you've got all your ducks in a line for a potential positive test. And that ended up being very helpful advice.
And let me ask you, your ducks in a row, are you making mental notes or?
I'm making mental notes. I'm warning people as best I can with the gag order that I had in place. So, Rudy got in my car, 2 o'clock, driving him to the emergency room. He's eating a banana. He's eating an apple. He's mad. He's throwing things in my backseat. I am masked, but at that time we weren't really masking for COVID, but I was masked with just a plain surgical mask, nothing special. I had gloves on, and that was it. And so I was with him, driving him to the emergency room. We get to the emergency room. He gets tested. While I'm in the emergency room, I get a call from an infectious disease specialist in New York City asking me why I was testing him and all of the reasons behind my thinking about why we needed to continue to pursue this, which was a little shock to my system, and I felt a little on edge about that. But I felt like we had good reasoning.
But you think you got that call because maybe they're trying to build a case for how they will approach it? Not so much as a questioning your medical decision, but how they're, because at that time we were writing the book as we were going along. We were writing all the operating procedures for this going forward.
You're absolutely right, and I hadn't thought of that at the time, but they were wanting to find out what kind of symptoms were triggering my interest in testing him further, and why we kind of pushed that a little bit further than we normally would. Normally, we just let him
work through it.
Yeah. So he got tested. I took him back to his room, and on my drive back, I realized, so I've been exposed. I can't really be around the team anymore. I've got to notify my trainer to let him know that there's a potential that something might happen tonight. So I called up the head athletic trainer, Donnie Strack, and let him know that there might be somebody that we're testing for COVID, and I want you to be prepared in case that happens, we need to do something at the game, which he did. He ran with that. I went home, called my friend Brian Coleman to cover me because I had been exposed. I didn't want to expose the entire rest of the team. And I was sitting, waiting for the result. Thankfully, the infectious disease specialist, Linda Salinas, pushed my sample to the front of the line. Normally it was taking about 6 hours. So we tested him around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 6 hours would be 9 o'clock. The game started at 7. But I got a call at 6:45 to me saying the test was positive, and so what do I want to do? In my mind, what am I doing? What do I do at this point?
Pace, yeah.
I had promised his team that I would let them know first and give them first right of the information. So I let them know, but I told them that I'm going to give you a minute to make a decision on what you want to do because I'm calling the NBA in 36.
Did you take a big, deep breath before you made that call, right?
I did.
Yeah, you're like, okay, everything's going to change after I do this.
You don't completely think about all the things that are going to change during that time, but it was weighing on me heavily. I didn't sleep the night before, too, just thinking about all the different scenarios as well. I called the NBA, let them know what had happened, and the head doctor said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I thought that was kind of a funny response.
You've probably been the closest that anybody's been to this, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you now become the subject matter expert because you've been in front of the subject and you've gone through it. Not many physicians have done that yet, certainly in the NBA.
No. So my immediate response was, we got to call off the game. Didn't realize that the calling off a game isn't as easy as just saying we're going to call off the game. So it required that the head of the NBA be involved. It required that the governor and the Department of Health be involved with that decision making. Thankfully, the governor was at the game. So when they called, he was at the game and they huddled at the game. The head athletic trainer did several really key things at that point. And one thing that he did is he put the game on pause. So this is around 7 o'clock. So
and
the game is supposed to be starting. I'm
home.
at home.
So
fretting.
Okay, gotcha. Probably can't watch it on TV either at that time either. So you're just sitting there with it sitting by your phone.
Well, and I'm in a separated area because I didn't want to expose my wife to.
Right,
so I was like, but I was calling different individuals to kind of let them know what had happened. So our head athletic trainer got the halftime entertainment to kind of stall the game while they were making the decision. They did decide to go ahead and call the game. They also wanted to make sure that the crowd didn't stampede out of the area, and so they had the media kind of decide how to tell that version of what needed to be done. And so they did it in a very calm manner. They calmly left the place. And then the work began that we had to test players to see who else was positive besides Rudy. And so, again, thankfully, I was able to call up the head of OU Health at that time and ask for help. They sent a cadre of nurses down to test the opposing team's players. My counterpart that was at the game helped with that testing, helped to organize that testing. We sent that testing off as well as the referees at the time were tested. Our players did not get tested because it would have used way too many resources. Right. So we tested them in a different way later. And then, the world changed. Basically. Absolutely.
Now, did you contract COVID during that experience?
I didn't.
Okay.
So I found out on April Fool's Day, so 3 weeks later, that I hadn't contracted. I got tested about a week later, and I did contract COVID, but it was a year later, and I was presenting this case for a national conference, and I contracted it at the national conference. So,
well, I went at the time I was living in Montana and helping the state with their approach to addressing COVID when I was running the hospital association there, and bumping into our team members in our hospitals all across the state. Never contracted it. I came back here and went on a mission trip this last summer to Costa Rica, and I got it. And I wouldn't have known it if one of the other participants, when they got home, wasn't feeling well and went to the ED and was tested. And then we all were texted by her saying, "Hey, I've got COVID. You need to know." And I was one of those asymptomatic people. I may have been the whole time, but certainly a lot of folks have generated or have shown symptoms through all of it. But it is amazing. We all have our story when we first contracted it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in that whole experience, what did you learn in going through all of that? Because not many team physicians are going to have an experience like that. What did you learn, and how did that shape yourself as a physician going forward?
One thing that I learned about myself was just to trust my gut level about what was going on at the time. So the trainer had told us that he had a fever. When we got up there, he didn't have a fever, and he didn't really feel that bad, but there was this gut level feeling that he wasn't his normal self. So that was one thing and the second was just how important it was to have a team around you that could help with all the different pieces of this that needed to happen for that to work well. So the trainer could have blown off the symptoms. We could have blown off the symptoms. My ID consultant could have. Just so many things could have not worked. We could have gotten the testing back at 9:00 at night, and they could have played the whole game.
Right.
So there were so many things that worked just perfectly in order for that for us to know before the game started, or else there could have been a whole cadre of people exposed too.
Well, and I think for folks that wonder about artificial intelligence, that's something they can't pick up on. Just that wealth of experience that you've had, and just the feeling. When you had that feeling, and you don't pick that up in a AI telling you what the diagnosis is, which is what everyone kind of fears today. And so it is great that we have physicians that certainly fall back on their experience and what they've learned. So we went through COVID, but now you've got to deal day in day with keeping the athletes healthy. What do you do in terms of how you approach promoting the healthy behaviors and the things that are necessary to keep these athletes from experiencing an injury? Is there something that you do in terms of how you coach them through any of that, or any of the other members on the care team?
It's really the members of the care team that do most of the coaching. I provide education and recommendations, but it's really the training staff that carries out those and use their own experience too to kind of help to prevent injuries. And so there's a variety of ways that we do that, whether it be immunizations, whether it be just the way that they train, the way that they eat. They have a in-house chef that kind of prepares food for them so that we make sure that they're eating in a healthy way. Just that whole, again, a cadre of ways that that different people with different expertise, whether it be people that help them with how they lift weights, how they set up the way that they train, how they set up the way that how many free throws that they shoot, or how they find out where their biggest strengths are or their weaknesses are. Again, that is much more than me by a long way. So
absolutely. So you're helping them, the whole care team surrounding them, helping to create. These are just incredible athletes when it comes down to it. But what happens when an injury occurs? How do you? You're sitting up there, you're watching it, everything's going great, and one of the players goes down. Whether it's one of our players or one of the visiting players, what then happens? With Jim Barrett, what changes in you immediately?
Well, again, alertness for what and trying to find out what the mechanism of whatever happened was. The NBA has a playback system, so we can, on our phone, after an injury, look immediately and replay the injury so that we can make decisions about what happened during the time. We don't go out on the court unless it's a absolute emergency and life-threatening, typically. So I've been out on the court one time.
Since in your entire
during
career?
the past 5 years.
Past 5 years, okay.
During the past 5 years. I've been out on the court for other things, for other sports, but for basketball. And that was a player who had a concussion, went down and was posturing on the court. And the sign is a fist up in the air. And if you see the fist up in the air, you better get your butt on down there as quickly as possible. The majority of the time, our role is to go back into the training room to evaluate the players in the training room in a kind of a more set environment so that we can hear what's going on, we can evaluate them more clearly, and we don't have a lot of eyes looking over and taking pictures of what we're doing. So most of the injuries go back to the training room. In the back there is an X-ray facility as well as a place where we can evaluate them. They have the ability to do rehab right there in the arena. And so the majority of it is taken care of there. If they need any kind of advanced imaging, it's done at other spots.
So if a player does have an injury, not a career-ending injury, but certainly an injury that does require rehab over multiple days or a week, where is that done? Is that done through OU? Do you guys provide that rehab for them? And then what is your role in that part of their recovery?
Really, it's done by the training staff. All of the training staff for the Thunder are both they're dually certified, both athletic trainers as well as physical therapists, and so they all have this huge skill set of abilities to rehab players over time. If they need anything extra, then they may reach out to specific therapists in the community. But the majority of the injuries they take care of themselves. Now, injuries in the NBA, a lot of times because players are highly paid and they typically have additional people that are looking out for them.
Sure.
Many times they get second opinions all over the country. And so it's not unusual for a player that has an injury, let's say a knee injury, to go to one of the coasts to have
Andrews
further evaluation.
Or someplace like that. Yeah,
Absolutely. So that is so that we make sure that we're doing the right thing for the player.
Very good. Well, those of you joining us, we're talking to Dr. Jim Barrett. He's the team physician for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And when we return, we're going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what parents can do to protect and to prepare their children to be the next elite athletes, perhaps playing in the NBA, when we return back to Inside the 1581. Looking to elevate your support services? Forefront Healthcare is a leading provider of food, environmental services, and facility management to hospitals all across the country, and was recently recognized as a 2023 Top 100 Best Places to Work by Modern Healthcare magazine. So to learn more about Forefront Healthcare and how they can help elevate your patient, staff, and family experience at your facility, visit forefronthealthcare.com or call 1-800-684-6450. Welcome back to this edition of Inside the 1581. For those of you who are joining us, you may be asking yourself, what is the 1581? And so we kind of arrived at our podcast name. It's synonymous with the 1,581 miles of border in the state of Oklahoma. And so as we're trying to come up with what would be a unique name, and we just settled on Inside the 1581. And that's what we're doing in our show. We're going to be talking about issues that are important to the people of Oklahoma. We're going to talk a little bit about folks who have had an impact on our state. And today we're talking to Dr. Jim Barrett, who certainly has had an impact on the city of Oklahoma as the team physician for the Thunder. And we just have listened to him talk about everything that went into the team's response to COVID-19 when the team was hit with that on March 11th in 2020. And so now we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, as parents, what is it that we should be doing to protect our children as they continue to play everything from t-ball to full contact sports. And so, Jim, what are some suggestions you have? Let's start with football. I mean, as a parent, I had a son that was a pretty gifted athlete, and after his third concussion, we decided he wasn't going to play football anymore. And some parents will continue to have their kids play. That was just a decision we made. So, as a team physician, as a parent, what suggestions or recommendations you would have for parents for their kids as they're watching them grow up in sports, which is so important for them, and then certainly when they are hit with a potential injury? Kind of walk us through some of your thoughts about that.
So I would start with a couple of hints. One would be that as a parent, you kind of live through your children. I certainly did with my kids, and so my aspirations for them were different than their aspirations were, and it took me a while to kind of figure that out. And one of the key moments was I took my daughter to a basketball camp, and she cried all the way down, and I made her go play basketball at the camp. The second time I took her, she cried all the way down. I said, "You're not quitting. You need to go." Third time she cried, and I thought, what am I, this is for me. This is not for her. And so we turned back around and went to Brahms and forgot about the basketball camp. So first of all, just trying to make sure your motivations are for your child. Second would be to think about trying to get them exposed to a lot of different sports instead of just one sport. We know that injuries go up and that burnout goes up when you specialize too early in sports. And so it's ideal if you can have them exposed to a variety of different sporting type activities. When they're really young, you just want to have fun with them. They just want to have fun and kind of learn the very most basics of how to do the sporting activity. And then as they get older, let's say, so preschool to early elementary, again, you just want them to kind of figure out how to throw a ball, how to dribble, something like that. And then as they get closer to junior high, then you can start thinking about whether it makes sense to do one or two sports at the most, but maybe specializing a little bit more at that time.
I know as a dad, when, some of my children played baseball, softball, football, water polo, swimming, volleyball, a variety of sports. And so as a parent, you were trying to figure out at what level of conditioning should they be going through? In other words, at what point does your son or your daughter start lifting weights? My son, I can still remember him coming and saying, "Dad, I want to have this weight gain supplement. I want to do this and that." And you kind of step back not knowing what to tell your children. So what would be your recommendation when the kids want to start lifting weights or they want to supplement their diet? What are your thoughts about that?
For weightlifting in particular, I think it's okay to start some, but very lightweight lifting, even as young as 6 to 8, it's fine to do some very just toning type of activity, but you really can't build muscle until you kind of have testosterone or what other, in your body. So really adolescence is where you can start to build up that muscle mass. And so lifting for bulk is something that you want to wait until probably adolescence. As far as training goes, kids can, so first of all, are they interested in training, and are they mentally equipped to train? Are they, and once they kind of are at that level, then I think it's okay to start the training. But again, you want them to have some fun with that activity. You don't want it to be something that will burn them out and will turn them off of sports, because in the end, really, most of us, the whole reason for sports is to kind of learn how to play with other people, how to understand that losing isn't the worst thing in the world.
Absolutely.
And that long term, I want to stay healthy, and I want to learn how to condition my body. And so that's another thing that you learn through doing sports. So for most of us, that's what our sporting activity is going to do. It's going to provide that foundation. For me, it provided the foundation of how to study, how to work with other people. And so that was an unthought of part of it as well.
Well, when I look at how my kids conditioned, certainly a lot of it was done through the school system, and just chasing dad, around. I really enjoyed when one of my sons decided, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to start running with you." So that part is fun. And I think we think about working out and all of that, but sleep is so important and recovery is so important. What would you say to parents about making that a priority? Sometimes it's hard to get your kids to turn it off and go to bed or so forth, but recovery and with athletes, they really do appreciate recovery. Give us some parents some advice on that as well.
Well, you've hit it on the head. So sleep is foundational to your body recovering, and so having a normal night's sleep, and most people would say between 7 to 10 hours of sleep, depending on how old you are, is critical for that piece of it, and then having some rest from that sport uh, throughout throughout a season, and then having some time off from it again to allow any lingering injuries or minor nagging things to have time to heal. Another thing that I see with parents that I would just encourage is that frequently I'll recommend a period of rest for an athlete. And it's not complete rest. A lot of times we call it relative rest, where they're allowed to do other things, but they are resting from that specific sport so they can heal. And I'll get pushback because they've got a game coming up right away, and
I paid for that travel team. We're going to travel.
Absolutely, and they're crucial. They're the crucial player for that team. But I would just encourage you and warn you that kind of behavior then gets picked up by your child, and then it becomes their mantra, and they don't pay attention to their body as well, and don't pay attention to injuries as well. So I would encourage that you do allow that rest, whether it be recommended by your physician or after, let's say, after a season. There needs to be some time for some rest, not only for them, but for you as a parent too. Going from one activity to the next activity to the next activity is time consuming, and it doesn't always build rapport with your kids, your wife, the rest of your family. So,
well, and certainly if you're exhausted, your kids know it. You know, you run on edge, say things, do things that you wish you hadn't, and so the stress that the athlete goes through, certainly family members do. I think that's really, really sage advice. When we look at young people today, the temptations, the challenges they have in adolescence are significant, and we celebrate the reductions in tobacco consumption. But now we're seeing this terrible response to that, which is growth in vaping. And so as a physician, what are your thoughts about that? And we will hear folks say, well, it's much safer than smoking. But we're reading the evidence and we're seeing that is not the case. And your thoughts on that, and if you were telling a young person today, notwithstanding whether they're an athlete or not, about vaping, what would you say to them?
Very similar message to what I would say about smoking. That they're
interchangeable. Really, we should look at it.
I agree totally. That you have one chance to kind of protect your lungs, and especially when you're young, you feel invincible about it. But having those having healthy lungs is critical to life later. So I again, equal to smoking. It's not safe, and I think multiple studies have shown that there's a huge risk to that, and it also leads to other activities too that may not be helpful to their life. Other type of drugs, other type of activities that may be detrimental, and so again, I'd just say avoid vaping. It's not safe.
I agree. And it's also obnoxious too.
It is.
It really is obnoxious. We look at at Oklahoma, we have such, a rich diversity in our state. But there seems to be something that ties us all together, unfortunately, and that's our high rate of obesity. And we look at our state in terms of how we perform in all of the health outcomes, and obesity is just right there front and center. And I believe the CDC ranked us as the third most obese in terms of adult obesity. So as a physician, and certainly as someone who takes good care of their health as well, thoughts on that and why that is something that we really need to focus in on, not only as a state, culturally with our political leaders, but also personally, taking an investment in our physical health and addressing obesity. Your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are that we have created an environment of convenience, and for many reasons that's not so bad. But some of the conveniences have caused our bodies to not be used as they normally would be. So, for example, walking has in most areas of Oklahoma, it's much more easier to get into your car than it is to walk to a place, and so that has led to that less ability to be physically active like we should be. Also, our jobs, many of our jobs are sitting jobs, and so you don't have that opportunity to get up and around. And we know that from studies that getting up and around is foundational to your health. So if I could give some advice, one would be to consider adding some sort of activity. It can be as little as walking, and the benefits are from the most minimal amount of walking. You get the most benefit from the least amount of walking, which sounds kind of weird, but right. If you are somebody that's a couch potato and you go to walking 5 minutes, you get a huge benefit to your health. Now, there's continued benefits from increasing that, but just that first bit of getting off the couch is probably the most important part. Walking after meals, or doing some other activity that you enjoy doing, and a whole host of activities. For me, I have to vary it. So for my personal health, I have to vary what I do. So I like to play tennis. I like to get on the elliptical. I like to swim. And I like to alternate those activities and then add some weightlifting in there a couple of times a week, just so that I can keep some muscle mass, because as I'm getting older, losing muscle mass every year. And so anything I can do to kind of resist that loss of muscle mass is helpful, and it burns calories.
And also making good food choices.
Absolutely.
I mean, clearly. And that's really hard sometimes.
It is. We as a society don't get enough fiber in our diet. And if we could just do one thing, is increasing the amount of fiber that you get in your diet, you probably would notice a substantial change in your health just from that itself. And fiber equals a lot of times fruit and vegetables. So adding that in and trying to find those healthy fruits and vegetables, fresh fruit that it's sometimes difficult to find in certain environments. So,
well, and I appreciate you kind of like promoting our next episode of Inside the 1581, where I think we're going to spend some time talking about the challenges in our state as it relates to food insecurity, and some of the work the hospitals are doing to provide food services and food pantries to the people in their communities. Dr. Jim Barrett, thank you so much for joining us today inside the 1581. As we wrap it up, I just want to say thank you to a couple important people. They're sitting in here in the studio with us today. Alex Taylor, who is our producer, who put all of this together, who's also doing our video recording that we'll be posting as well. Susie Wallace, who is the Director of Communications at the Oklahoma Hospital Association. She is the person that made all of this happen. And I want to thank, again, our guest, Dr. Jim Barrett, for this. And I also want to share with you as we close out, we will be looking at future episodes that are going to help us tell the story about what is going on in our state, not only from a health perspective, but things that we may want to celebrate as a community. So if any of our listeners have thoughts or suggestions, please feel free to share those with Susie, and we'll try and put that together. And I also want to mention, too, as we wrap up, our music track today. It's Gunslinger by the Ends of the Earth, and we're delighted to be able to have them serve as the music background to Inside the 1581. And so until next time, we enjoyed our conversation today, and we thank everyone for participating and listening to this episode of Inside the 1581, the 1,581 miles of border inside the great state of Oklahoma. Thank you.